With the 101st running of the 24 Hours of Le Mans this weekend, I figured I would cover 17 former F1 drivers who will be competing in this event. Now, I think there's 186 drivers who will participate this weekend, right? Because every vehicle has three drivers. So I'm only focusing on former F1 drivers that have at least one race. And then I'm also going to mention 2 IndyCar drivers who are currently in IndyCar and are participating in Le Mans. I'll start with the drivers with the most races, right? Most experience, and then work my way down. First driver you should probably know, and that's Jenson Button. He will be driving the Porsche 963 with Hertz Joda, and he's had 306 races in Formula 1, and he was the 2009 world champion. Next is Romain Grosjean. You are gonna know him from Drive to Survive or Haas, and him coming out of the burning car. He will be driving the Lamborghini SC63, and of course he's had 179 races in Formula 1, and he drove with Renault, Lotus, Haas, and he's actually one of the 3 drivers who currently drive in IndyCar. So he was just at Road America, he's at Le Mans right now for the race, and then once Le Mans is done, he goes back out to wherever in the States and starts driving for IndyCar. Next is Daniil Kvyat. He will be also driving the Lamborghini SC63. He had 110 races with Toro Rosso, Red Bull, and AlphaTauri. Next is Robert Kubica. Now, if you don't know his story, I highly recommend you check it out. He was a promising F1 driver. He got in an accident in 2011, broke his bones, fractured this, broke that, broke this. He wanted to get back into F1, but his injuries just did not allow him. I think he'll be driving the customer-backed Ferrari 499P, so not the factory entry, but the customer entry. He had 99 races in F1 and drove for Alfa Romeo, Williams, and Renault. Next is Kamui Kobayashi. I always mispronounce that first name, I'm sorry. He'll be driving the Toyota GR010, and he had 76 races in Formula 1 for Toyota, Sauber, and Caterham. Next is Antonio, I always have a hard time saying his last name, Giovinazzi. He's driving the factory-backed Ferrari 499P, and he had 62 races in Formula 1, and he raced for Sauber and Alfa Romeo. Next is Paul di Resta. He'll be driving the Peugeot 98, and he had 59 races in Formula 1 for Williams and Force India. Next is Jean-Eric Vergne, and he'll be also driving the Peugeot 98, and he had 50 races in Formula 1 with Toro Rosso. Next is Sebastien Buemi, and I always say Buemi the way that the characters played in Avatar: The Last Airbender, Buemi. He's driving the Toyota GR010, and he had 55 races in Formula 1 with Toro Rosso. Next, another big name I think a lot of people will recognize is Mick Schumacher. He'll be piloting the Alpine A424. He does have a full-time ride in the World Endurance Championship, and he's also the reserve driver for Mercedes. But if you guys have seen or paid attention in recent times, he had 43 races in Formula 1 with Haas. Next is Stoffel Vandoorne. Sorry if I mispronounced that. He's also driving the Peugeot 98, and he had 42 races in Formula 1 with McLaren. Next is Felipe Nasr. He'll be driving the Porsche, I think the Porsche-backed 963. And he had 20 races in Formula 1 with Caterham and Mauricia. I always mispronounce that. I'm sorry, I'm not good with names. Next is Sebastien Bourdais. He will be driving the Cadillac V-Series R, and he had 27 races in Formula 1 with Toro Rosso, and he was actually a very strong IndyCar driver with 151 races. He doesn't currently drive an IndyCar. He has Formula 1 experience, World Endurance experience. He also drives an IMSA, and he was an IndyCar, so he has a pretty good resume. Next is Brendon Hartley. He will be driving the Toyota GR010, and he had 25 races in F1 with Toro Rosso. Will Stevens, he will be driving the Porsche 963, and he had 20 races in F1 with Caterham and Mauricia. And here's another name a lot of us will recognize, and that's Nyck de Vries. He will be driving the Toyota GR010, and he had 11 races in F1, driving for Williams, and the most recent team that let him go was AlphaTauri. Next we have is Jack Aitken. He will be driving the Cadillac V-Series R, and he is the one with the least amount of experience or races in F1, as he only had one race with Williams, I think back in 2020 or 2021. Now, the next two drivers I'm gonna mention are IndyCar drivers, and that's because they currently still drive in IndyCar today. Same thing with Romain Grosjean, where they had the Indy 500, then they go to Detroit, then they go to Road America, and then after that, they go to Le Mans to prep and do sim work and go do testing and practice. They're gonna run the race, and then I think it is next weekend or in 2 weeks, they're back in the IndyCar, back in their schedule. So we have Alex Palou. He will be driving the Cadillac V Series R for Chip Ganassi, and he currently races in IndyCar. And you know, he was actually on track to go to Formula One as well. As a side note. Next is Scott Dixon, who will also be driving the Cadillac V Series R for Chip Ganassi. Now, they're not, Alex Palou and Scott Dixon are not in the same car, but same team. And he also currently drives in IndyCar. And that's the full list of former Formula One drivers and a few IndyCar drivers who will be participating in Le Mans. Again, there's 186 drivers. You have all kinds of history and background in these drivers. I'm just specifically talking about former F1 and a few IndyCar drivers in this video. And it's so annoying when I see comments, well, I see these comments a lot more on IndyCar, but also in the World Endurance Championship, where people will be like, oh man, endurance racing is just a washout series of F1 drivers. And it's like, dude, are you serious? Like, is that how? It boggles my mind to see those comments. So anyways, hopefully you learned something. Tune into the race because it's gonna be a good one. And I'll see you in the next one.